Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to It's Rainmaking Time. This is Kim Greenhouse. It is a great pleasure today to be interviewing Art Horn, who's a meteorologist who's been 25 years on the air delivering the weather in Portland, Maine. He is the founder of The Art of Weather, a wonderful program that teaches weather to different parts of the world, not only in the United States, but around the world so that people really understand it. He is a wonderful meteorologist. He was one of the first people to be part of the first international conference on climate change in New York. He is a board member of icecap.us, a writer for the online magazine Energy Tribune, and also Pyjamas Media. He has an ability to make weather and climate understood to children, to teenagers, to adults in all different types of locations and places and perspectives. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to welcome Art Horn to It's Rainmaking Time. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Kim. That was a very nice intro. Thank you.
My pleasure. Your teaching, one of the things I became interested in you about is that you're teaching the art of weather to kids and to young adults, not only to adults, but to kids. And I just wonder, in the context of all the politicalization that's going on regarding weather and climate, how is it going for you? What is it like doing this? And do you miss being a full-time TV on-air anchor for delivering the weather?
Well, let me address that first. The answer would be no. I did television for 25 years. Television has a lot of very bizarre hours. If you're working the morning shift, the news starts typically at 5 a.m., so you're up at 2, in by 3:30, going like crazy to get all the pictures together and making the forecast, and so that's a difficult shift. And then if you're working the evening shift, say doing the 5, 5:30, 6, and 11, you're in at 2:30 and getting out of work at 11:30 at night. So there's some disadvantages there. No, I enjoy working for myself now. So that's the answer to that. As far as the schools goes, I have a program called How the Weather Works that I gear for third grade and up. And at the end of the program, I do address a bit of the climate change, global warming issue. I give them the good news about the polar bears, that they are actually proliferating and that the predictions of their extinction are just that. They're just forecasts. The reality is, in the 1960s, the worldwide estimate of polar bear populations was in the range of about 5,000, and today the estimates are about 25,000. So the polar bears are very hardy, very tough. I mean, to live in the places that they do, they must be, and they're doing just fine. And then I tell them about how temperatures changed over the millennia, how we can use isotopes of oxygen to measure temperature in the past and see the different ice ages and the little brief warm-ups in between, called the interglacial periods, which we are fortunate enough to live in. And then I show them what we know about the temperature over the last 150 years, the last 2,000 years, the last 10,000 years, and show them that the climate is always changing. It's always going up and down. And that recently, in the last 150 years, it has, in general, been sloping up, but that there are fluctuations in that as well, and we can explain those changes with changes that occur in the sun and in the oceans. So I try to explain to them that carbon dioxide is not pollution. It's been demonized by groups and individuals that want you to believe that. But I try to show them that if you actually took all the carbon dioxide out of the air, the Earth would die. It is essential for life on Earth as we know it. And so I try to give them something of that. It's not the thrust of the whole program. I actually have a more in-depth show called Understanding Global Warming, which I solicit to high schools. And I have had a few high schools take me up on it and bring me in, and I do an hour program for the kids, mainly, like I say, high school level, to give them a much more in-depth look at how temperature changes, and is there any relationship to the change in carbon dioxide, and are humans having a negative effect, and why do we hear all of this? In the newspapers and the television and the radio, why do we always hear?
And in books and on websites
and everywhere. There's this waterfall, Niagara Falls of information about how people are going to be destroying the climate. And I explained to them that there is no real solid science to prove that. There are computer models which attempt to predict the future of the climate, but like I tell them, we're still trying to get the seventh day on the 7-day forecast right, much less the 50 to 100-year forecast. And I point out that the computer model predictions are failing even over the short term. From the forecast from 2001 for 2010 shows the temperature significantly warmer, and the reality is the global temperature has been falling now. We're in the 9th straight year of a downward trend in temperature. So even over the short term, the temperature predictions are failing. So that's what I try to do. There has been occasionally a little the backlash. Sometimes a student will go home and tell their parent that the polar bears aren't drowning, and if the parent believes that, then the parent might approach the principal and express some problem with that. That has been an issue. But I'm just trying to give the kids a more realistic viewpoint of this whole thing instead of the alarmist viewpoint, which is not supported by real science, but just by computer models, which can be tweaked to give you a result that you might need to get the answer you want.
I understand you're an Emmy-nominated meteorologist, or what did you get an Emmy nomination for?
In 2006, I produced and hosted, co-produced and hosted a program with Connecticut Public Television called Hurricane Direct Hit. It was a 1-hour documentary pointing out that here in Connecticut, where I'm based, we do occasionally get hurricanes. And there haven't been very many in the last few decades, but they do tend to come in bunches. And it's related to the 60-year cycle in the Atlantic Ocean. The Atlantic Ocean warms up for 25 to 30 years, then it cools off for 25 to 30 years. And when it's warmer, there's more heat energy over the ocean, more humidity, more fuel to run hurricanes. You really can think of a hurricane as an engine in the atmosphere. Just like a car engine needs gasoline, a hurricane engine needs hot, humid air. That's the fuel for the hurricane. And the warmer the water, the more humidity there is in the atmosphere, the more energy there is to run these hurricanes. And that was the program was talking about that we are, or have been since the mid-'90s, back into the warm water phase, and that hurricanes have become much more active again in general, and that Connecticut is due for another big storm. But fortunately, it hasn't happened, but it is only a matter of time if you look at history. So, that was the show, and then we were nominated, and I went to Boston to the award ceremony and listened to somebody else win, but that's okay. It was nice enough just to be nominated.
Is it available for purchase anywhere?
Oh, the program. Yeah, I do sell them on my website, actually. You could, but if you want a copy, you can just email me at skychaserman@cox.net, and I'd be happy to, for $10, it can be yours. Skychaserman@cox.net.
And that's at the Art of Weather also?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So have you ever chased hurricanes?
I have not. I certainly know people that have. When I worked in Florida, I knew a guy by the name of Richard Horodner who really is amazing. I mean, he'll fly right to these hurricanes and drive right into them to get the amazing video that you oftentimes see on programs. But no, I haven't actually gone into a hurricane. Doing television for 25 years, if there is a hurricane, I'm working or have been. And it's a very dangerous thing to do.
I would imagine. What is your mission, though? You're a meteorologist. You have produced a documentary. You have a program, a training program for people about weather. What is your purpose really now, given what's happened with the politicalization of climate?
Yeah. Well, in the program I do called Global Warming Update, The Inconvenient Science, I just like to present people with information that they've never heard before. I show them show the relationship between the global temperature and the changes in the sun, and I show them the relationship between global temperature and the changes in the oceans. And then I show them the evidence that there is no concrete scientific proof that humans are causing climate change. I then show them the research papers that have been done to prove that we are not having an effect, such as the Dr. Douglas's paper from 2007 from the University of Rochester. He did a very exhaustive study looking for the global warming fingerprint. See, the computer models predict that if global warming is proceeding as they say it is, then in the upper atmosphere above the equator, from about 30 degrees north to 30 degrees south, up 20 to, say, 50,000 feet, there should be a global warming fingerprint, and that is a pronounced warming of the upper atmosphere. And it would be at twice the magnitude of the surface. So what Douglas did was he looked at all of the upper air data we have, the weather balloons that are launched twice a day, and he looked at this data for over 50 years and looked for a trend, and when he came up with his final analysis, he found there wasn't one. When you look at the real-world data, then look for the fingerprint, it simply is not there. And this completely nullifies the predictions of the computer models. They don't know how to predict what the climate in the future is going to be. Even Kevin Trenberth, who is the director of the National Center for Atmospheric Research in Boulder, Colorado, has admitted it. He says the computer models are in no way resemble the real-world climate. They are crude approximations of what the real world is. And then I also point out a recent paper in 2009 by Dr. Lindzen from up at MIT, and what he did is this. The greenhouse theory, no pun intended.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, I really want to sort out this greenhouse effect, because in my name, I'm getting trashed.
Right. The greenhouse effect says that the sun warms the ground warms the air. There are greenhouse gases in the atmosphere which help to retain some of that heat. Most of it radiates back out to space, especially if it's clear. But gases like water vapor, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide are what we call greenhouse gases. That is, they absorb some of that heat that's going back to space and re-radiate it back towards the Earth's surface. And that keeps the planet nice and comfortable. Of course, you need the sun most of all. So the focus of Dr. Lindzen's study this year, or in 2009, was to see if the greenhouse effect is increasing.
Can I stop you here for 1 second? Just
Sure.
This is for audiences, because as you're going in your current frame of reference, most of us may be lost, because I'm not even sure I understand. Is the greenhouse effect considered bad or has gotten a bad rap? Because when I think of what a greenhouse does, a greenhouse grows things.
Yeah, the real atmosphere doesn't behave like a greenhouse. It's really a poor analogy.
Okay, that's
really
what I wanted to clarify.
Yeah, it really isn't a greenhouse. It's more complex than that. But the only thing I'm trying to point out is with Dr. Lindzen's study is that using satellite information, using data from satellites, he was able to determine from the mid-'80s to the late '90s, when the oceans were going through a warming because of cycles, that the amount of heat going to space was not being reduced by the greenhouse effect. See, if the greenhouse effect is getting more enhanced by increases in carbon dioxide, the amount of heat going to space should decrease, warming the Earth. What he found was the amount of heat going to space was increasing because the oceans were warmer and the atmosphere opened up the window a little bit more to let out more heat. So that's another study which points conclusively that the greenhouse theory that putting more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere by humans it will cause the Earth to warm simply is not valid. It doesn't work. It isn't true.
What do you think about the fact that there's this huge push from search engines like Google, which Al Gore's on the board of, and the huge online electronic push in a particular specific direction? Well,
when it comes to Al Gore, Dennis Miller had a brilliant little statement that he made, and it was this: beware of the prophet seeking profits.
That's interesting.
You know, Gore is heavily invested in companies that will benefit from the greenhouse policies towards cap and trade, developing these carbon trading markets, So he's up to his neck in this stuff. And some people say, well, if you believed in it, in this theory, you'd be wanted to be invested in it too. But it's disingenuous, while he's going around preaching that this is a terrible thing, he's at the same time looking to make billions from it.
Well, this is the issue. The issue is that there is a huge, massive conflict of interest and conflicts of interest at work here.
There are.
That works at cross purposes to a real state of emergency.
Renjandra Pachauri is the chairman of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change from the United Nations. And it's been recently discovered that he, too, is heavily invested in companies that will benefit from the policies that come from the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It's completely, it should be illegal. I mean, if this was a regular company, you'd be fired. And it's ridiculous so that you can be that have that much control over opinions of climate change that will positively affect your investments. This is where it is, though. I mean, what they say, follow the money, and that's where a lot of this is. That's why so many different groups, areas have signed on to the global warming myth because there's money to be made in it.
Do you understand the carbon trading exchange?
Well, basically, cap and trade works. Basically, it works like this: you have a utility, say, and they have a certain allowance, a carbon allowance. They can only emit so much carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So let's say that this utility A does not exceed their limit, but utility B does. So utility B will be fined if they don't stay under their limit. So they can buy credits from utility A so that they can make up for their excess. So company A makes money by selling their excess credits to utility B. It doesn't reduce the amount of carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere.
It's another game, isn't it?
And of course it is. It's a Wall Street game. This whole carbon trading scam is all about that. You're literally taking something from thin air and making money out of it.
Let me tell you something, Art. This I've did several shows on this. That's what issuing money produces. I mean, central banking is about issuing money out of thin air. It's actually creating credit out of nothing.
Right.
And so it's a similar functionality. It's a similar mindset and paradigm to do it out of thin air, out of something that doesn't even exist as a true problem.
And that's the genius of it.
Well, that's the insidiousness of it for sure, and the sophistication.
That's what's amazing about it is that you've created an entirely new tradable commodity by pumping up fear of carbon dioxide, which is nothing to be afraid of. I mean, we breathe out carbon dioxide with every breath, and all creatures on Earth need it to survive. When you take something that's harmless and vilify it, you actually increase its value because it was basically valueless before. But now, because it's evil, it increases in value. So therefore, we need to do something about it because it's this, as the EPA said, a dangerous pollutant. So being a dangerous pollutant, we need to regulate it, we need to control it, and therefore, by doing that, you actually give it more value. The EPA, in their recent decision to use the Clean Air Act to regulate carbon dioxide, is going to be a sweeping change. I mean, everything. You control carbon, basically you control life. And there's going to be regulations of carbon emissions on just about everything you can possibly imagine, and all for really nothing. The smart people will, get on board. The traders and the brokerage houses will get on board with this, and eventually the bubble will probably burst because as the temperature continues to go down for the next 20 to 25 years,
we're in a cooling period. I hear
we are.
Serious cooling period.
Well, it could be pretty interesting, yeah, because the sun is really going very quiet. It has been quiet. And even though the number of sunspots began to increase last month, the The AP index, which is a measure of the geomagnetic activity of the sun, has continued to go down and is now lower than any time since we've been able to measure it since I believe it was around 1837. The sun is really going into a different period, and there is a very interesting relationship between sunspot activity, the length of the sunspot cycles, and the temperature. And all of the solar indices are indicating that we're going into a cooling period that may actually accelerate over the next few years.
What is the AP index?
It's a measure of the geomagnetic activity. It's kind of an indirect measure of the strength of the sun, the strength of the sun's magnetic activity.
Who measures it?
NASA measures it. You can just Google it, and you can just Google AP index.
Here's my question. If NASA is involved, God forbid, in perpetrating the part of the story that's untrue about global warming, if that's the position of NASA, then aren't they eventually going to distort the AP index findings?
So far, there doesn't seem to be any attempt to do that. There has apparently been an attempt to distort the temperature record. The Goddard Institute for Space Studies in New York, real interesting. If you look at the changes, let's take the 150 years of record of the United States temperature. In 1999, 1921, 1931, and 1934 were all the warmest years in that period from the last 150 years. Today, 1998 is the warmest year, and all those other years are now cooler. Now, how did they change? How could the history of 1921, 1931, and 1934 get cooler? Well, because you can cook the books. What's been happening at Goddard is apparently they are adjusting, and you can see this in the data. They are manipulating the data, cooling the past, and then enhancing the present.
Is that verifiable?
Oh, absolutely, it is.
How does one verify that?
There's going to be a paper out very soon at this Science and Public Policy Institute that's going to detail exactly how this is done. It's quite complicated. It deals with the deletion of stations, weather stations. You know, in the 1970s, we had about 6,000 climate monitoring stations around the world. That's down to under 2,000 now. And what's happened is that the various data collection centers, like the Climate Research Unit at the University of East Anglia in England, which is knee-deep in this whole ClimateGate scandal, they and NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, have been apparently selectively taking out higher latitude stations, higher elevation stations, and rural stations from the climate base.
How is this? How are we ever going to get, from this point forward, an integrity-based way to track what's happening if the agencies involved have been co-opted and are in collusion?
Well, it's by studies and reports and programs like this. Eventually the word is going to get out. The ClimateGate scandal really opened up the floodgate for this whole thing. It gave the climate realists a focal point to emails where we can see that people were involved in all kinds of nefarious activity.
The many people would say there's a whole other dialogue about that, what you're describing, in that the, quote, opposing sides and the opposing forces and agencies would say that was a concocted thing, it wasn't real, somebody actually came in and did something criminal, it was concocted by the opposition, blah, 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 blah.
Well, there's so much of it. There's so many thousands of emails that it has been, and Phil Jones at CRU admitted it. He said, yes, we've been broken into. He verified that there was a release of emails. Nobody knows whether they were hacked or it was an inside job. There seems to be more evidence that it was actually somebody from the inside who released the emails and the documentation because it's just so much of it. and it would be so hard to get in from the outside. So maybe somebody had a guilty conscience in there and finally decided to do something about it.
Are you familiar? Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, but there's always going to be those who will try to. They've got to defend themselves. I mean, they've been caught with their hand in the cookie jar. What's the first thing you do when you get your hand caught in the cookie jar? Oh, I was looking for my homework, but I think the dog ate it. They're going to make excuses, of course.
Are you familiar with the site What's Up With That?
Sure, Anthony Watts, yeah. He did the brilliant study of the weather sites around the United States.
Can you explain what he did?
Yeah, real easy. There's something like 1,200 climate monitoring stations around the country, and he wanted to know about the integrity of them. So we got a bunch of volunteers together. Well, interestingly, the pictures of the sites used to be on a website. I don't remember which one, a government website. And when Anthony began to request information from it, the website was closed. So he went out and got a bunch of volunteers, and they went all over the country, and they took pictures of the climate stations to see if they matched up with the government's own criteria, such as being 300 feet away from a heat source, something that could affect the temperature of the site. And he found that 90% of them, 90% of the sites looked at, and I think he's up over 1,000 now, do not meet the government's own standards for measuring temperature. They're very sloppy, and that affects the temperature, and especially the nighttime temperatures. See, that's when global warming really is. If you look at the data, the global warming is at night, and it's in the winter at night. And that's all because of this urbanization factor, the urban heat island. If you have say for instance, you have a climate station in 1900 that's on a farm 20 miles, or let's say 10 miles west of Chicago. By today, that climate station is no longer on a farm. It's in a city. It's urban sprawl has gone all around it. So that will make the temperatures warmer, especially at night, because the sun heats up the roads and the buildings and things.
Doesn't cement make things hotter, too?
Yeah, especially dark surfaces. And they re-radiate that heat at night so that the temperatures stay warmer. So the temperature record from that station over the long term will show a gradual rise, but it's not because the climate was changing necessarily. It's because the environment around the climate measuring station was changing. Land use change. So the data is corrupted. The data is corroded with a lot of that stuff. And because these sites are so poorly what we call sited, that is, they have so many of these corrupting influences around them, that the magnitude of the changes is exaggerated. The upward trend from the mid-'70s to the late '90s is likely true, but the magnitude is probably off because of the urban heat island effect. So, using surface temperature to measure global temperature is not the best thing to do, because you're only measuring the temperature on the ground. The best way to really evaluate how the climate is changing long term is by measuring the entire atmosphere from the ground up to 100,000 feet, and we do that with weather balloons, and we've been doing that for a long time, and they don't show any dramatic changes.
I often wonder if the weather balloons are accurate, or are they disturbed when they go up that high, and if they're really viable. Can you just speak to that for a moment?
Well, I think they are. I think they're viable. We've taken an awful lot of measurements from them. We do this. We launch, just in the United States, we launch 100 of these twice a day, once in the Eastern time, once in the morning, and once in the evening. So we have many, many thousands of these observations, and their trend over the long haul is it's the trend you're looking for, and the trend is not showing a dramatic change. Certainly in the last 50 years, that was revealed conclusively in the Dr. David Douglas study of 2007.
As we close today's interview, can you share with audiences what a meteorologist does?
Well, the meteorologists can do a lot of different things. Some meteorologists do atmospheric research. They never do any forecasting. They use computer models to try to analyze the atmosphere, figure out how it works, develop weather prediction models so that we can have a better forecast for the next 3, 4, 5 days. Some meteorologists do climate research. Some meteorologists work for the government, say for the National Weather Service, making observations and making day-to-day weather predictions and issuing watches and warnings. Some meteorologists work for the military, such as the Air Force or the Navy, predicting the weather for our armed forces. And some work in television, doing weather forecasts for their audience.
At this point, can we be sure that the National Weather Service is getting us correct information, or is this the time that we need to be mindful and possibly suspect?
I'm suspect of NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, because they have a lot to lose if global warming is proven to be false. They are seeing large increases in their budgets each year, and if suddenly tomorrow it became conclusively clear that global warming was not being caused by human activity, a lot of you could see big budget cuts, and this extends all the way to the university system, to research facilities. That global warming is an industry. It's a multi-billion-dollar worldwide industry that has a tremendous vested interest in global warming. And if it went away, you'd see careers lost, jobs, houses. You'd see a lot of fallout from that. And we're not trying to do that. We're simply trying to tell people the truth.
Art, I want to thank you for being on It's Rainmaking Time, taking time out of your day to educate us. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been interviewing Art Horn, a meteorologist, the founder of The Art of Weather. You can reach him at theartofweather.com. If you would like him to come to your school or your university or your classroom, whether it's in a formal school or not, or any type of an event to learn about the art of weather, he is a board member of icecap.com, and he has spent 25 years at NBC as an on-air television weatherman. He can be also reached as a writer for the Energy Tribune, online, and Pyjamas Media. Art, thanks for being at It's Rainmaking Time. I look forward to speaking with you and learning from you again.
Thanks, Kim. It was a great pleasure, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, sir.